Hi, listeners. Thank you so much for tuning in and joining me for the next episode from the Lessons from the Playroom podcast. I I have with us today someone who's been on this podcast series before, and I have to say that in that episode, well, we already liked each other before the episode, but that episode really solidified a beautiful relationship and bond that has continued to flourish. So to say, I know I haven't said her name yet, it's coming, but to say that I am incredibly honored and grateful to spend this time with this really legend in our field and someone who's incredibly important to me is truly an honor. So I'm about to introduce her, but if you are able, if you're listening, to pause and go make yourself a cup of tea. I'm going to invite you to just hit pause and go make yourself a cup of tea, and then find a cozy place to relax as you tune in and join us in this really important conversation. So, who do I have with me today? I have the amazing, incredible Marie José Dhaese. And for those of you that don't know her, two things. One is I highly encourage you to go listen to the last episode that she and I did together on Holistic Expressive Play Therapy. For those of you that do know her, um, again, if you don't, you want a little bit of a reminder of who she is, let me just share a little bit about her bio, and then we're going to get into our conversation. So, she was born and educated in France. She's a registered clinical counselor, registered art therapist, registered play therapy supervisor, certified play therapist supervisor. Many of you might know her from her Center for Expressive Therapy, which really is more like a home on Vancouver Island. She has a beautiful video that we will put in the show notes for you to take a tour of. But her playroom is not just a playroom. Her playroom is really a sanctuary, probably the best way I can describe a sanctuary for children, for their healing, for their hearts. She celebrates 50 years now as a counselor and psychotherapist. She is the creator of Expressive Play Therapy. I do want to say that there are a lot of different types of what seem like expressive arts, expressive play therapy modalities that are out there, but I do want you all to know that she's the first. She was the originator, and she gets all the credit for that. She's a frequent speaker for play therapy, mental health conferences throughout North America, presenting the approach and methods she has pioneered, particularly in the field of abuse, loss, and trauma. And she doesn't just do the work alone. She has her beautiful puppies that are, that are often with her in her playroom. So, Marie José, thank you so much for joining me again.
Oh, thank you, Lisa. It's lovely to see you. Lovely to see you. Yeah.
Marie José, I mean, I just shared with everybody that, but before we recorded the last episode, you and I had an affinity for each other, even though we had never had a conversation. And then our first conversation was the last episode that we recorded together. And I think we decided that we really liked each other after that last episode. And you've just been such an important person in my life. And I just want to say thank you for all you've done for me and all you've done for so many other children, families, play therapists over the last 50 years.
Oh, yeah, you're welcome. It's lovely to make use to be able to have something to give after this long journey. And when it's received, it's always a pleasure. It means a lot. So thank you. Yeah. Yeah.
So I asked you back because um, I love your work, as you know, and you speak to a part of the life experience and you speak to part of the clinical experience that I don't think we talk about enough. And you
Mhm.
have such a beautiful way of talking about it. And your work comes from such a beautiful, deep, heart-centered place.
Mhm.
And as we continue to learn about you and feel the effects of the work that you have put out into the world, I just really want to capture your thoughts and your own heart around these pieces. And these pieces are around, you
Yeah.
know, our true nature and around this deep sort of essence that lies within all of us.
Well, I could say a few words, I think, with what's kept me going all these years. Um, and 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 that's the experience that I well, that this work has given me great joy, um, because it's given me the opportunity to connect to myself more deeply so I could, well, connect with my light, the torch that I is burning, and allow others to, to come and light their own. So I see, um, this work as an opportunity constantly to connect with myself with a big S. And what that is the big, it's been a long, lifelong journey that, started from the time I was a child. I think because of how difficult life was and continues to be for so many, it's a challenge being a human. And if we forget that, what I would call true nature, that light, that spiritual self, that is, that my mother shared with me in that story that I told you, um, that without that everything is so dark and so impossible to stay embodied and stay in this world and do anything with it. So for me, it's been an ongoing journey of, I would say, getting to know myself with a big S, getting more connected with it, losing it, and then finding ways of reconnecting with it so I could have a space that anyone who comes to see me can walk into that has um, um, enough light in it, enough attunement in it, enough safety and warmth, in all the layers we have, that they feel safe enough to reconnect with themselves. And then when that happens, it's just an amazing experience of following and guiding, and it's so easy that here I am, 77 years old, and I still, still have a full practice pretty well. So, yeah.
Marie José,
Does that make sense?
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
For those that maybe have heard the story, and I know many listeners probably have not heard the story that initiated this deep question inside of you, would you reshare the story of your little girl with your mom?
Yeah, that takes me way back. I was raised as a Catholic and on a farm in France. Um, we just moved from Normandy to the center of France, and because my name is a Flemish name, the children used to say to me that I was a foreigner. So that started my way of thinking. I was a little bit different and continued that. But I had to go to catechism at the end of the school day, and so that's where you're being taught about the religion. And the priest said that there was God, and I'd heard of God always. And I had my own idea of what that was or who that was and all of that. But he said it had no beginning, no middle, and no end, that it was eternal. Well, I must have been 6 or 7, and we had to walk a kilometer 4 times a day back and forth from the school to the farm. And on the way, I would just be mulling around what that could possibly be. And you can imagine farmers are always very busy, as was my mother was very busy. So I didn't have the opportunity for questions like that, which they didn't think too much of. And anyway, so finally in that summer, one summer there was, in the summertime, you have, at the time, it was drawn by horses, and I forget a lot of words now, but there was I can't remember the machine that the horses would draw to cut the fields, and then it would be gathered and so the men would be doing that kind of work, and the women would be going around with a basket and picking up any kind of little sheath of wheat and putting it in a basket so we could then give it to the animals. And so there, my mother and I are, it's really hot in the center of France in the summertime. And so we ended up, at some point sitting down in the shade, and I still remember asking my mother, finally, that big question that I've been going around is, where is God? Well, my farm lady mother looks at me, of course, and they thought I was a little bit different, to be honest. Anyway, so what she did is she took a sheath, of wheat. She took out the seed and showed me that little white dot that is the germ, and said, that's where God is. And so that stayed with me all this time, which is that that true nature to me is the seed, and that each and every one of us come as a seed that has in it, multi-generational, as well as many other things. And there is the seed itself, but then this little white dot that is the force that, if you put it in the ground and look after, will allow it to grow, make these little roots, and push right up and push right through towards the light. And so that's kind of, in a way, how I've always seen our development, in a way, that each and every one of us are a very unique seed, and that has its own gifts, its own things that it needs in order to grow. So, if you, if you're a violet, you'll have different needs than if you're a rose. Or forget-me-not, or an acorn and wanting to become an oak tree. So whichever it is, it's giving in the attachment the kind of the ground, the soil, the light, the kind of water, the light exposure that is ideal for this little plant to grow and be at its best. And to have enough protection at first, right? Because it can easily, be stopped from growing. And so that's basically, for me, is looking at how there's nature, that true nature, there's the nurture, and then on top of that are the traumas that we are, through life, we all get wounded. And if there isn't enough protection, more so, that makes it more challenging to become who you're meant to be, in a way, with as much as possible. So I see my work as being a bit of a greenhouse, right? Where these little plants that have been have pests on it sometimes, you know, and that have been hurt at different forms and different levels. And it's so challenging when the younger, if the trauma has been in the womb already, you see, of course it will be more challenging for it to grow and for that connection to be established. Now, part of the next piece is for the parent, ideally, to be able to reflect, to be kind of attuned enough and embodied enough and connected enough that they have enough energy and attention to see the child's true nature and reflect it, not project what they want, what's been done to them, you know, and all their triggers onto the child, which is easy to do, of course. But kind of observe and be there with and reflect, so that the child is constantly seeing that reflection of their true nature in the eyes of their caregiver, which isn't always their mother after a certain point for some of the children, but that they have ideally that reflection, and within the kind of enough, or within the protection, right, that is needed at every stage of development, right? So that then is what allows first the child to attach to, and I've got drawings of that I've seen, to attach in a way to their caregiver, to the mother, right? And it allows them, as more and more the mother is able to make more space, and they begin to then more and more attach to themselves. So the point of attachment from one generation to the next is to allow the young one to attach to themselves. So attachment is not just by itself because you need to be attached. It's necessary to attach to oneself because there has to be that mirroring, that consistent mirroring that allows to take in who you are. When you look in the mirror, what you see is what you saw in the eyes of your mother, or what has been reflected to you, and sometimes it's not you.
I have two questions that are coming to, actually three questions as we're going into this. The first question was right off of what you just said. Would you equate this feeling of attaching to self, or the child attaching to self, with them catching glimpses of their own true nature? Is that
Well, yeah. Well, that's how. Whoops! Something just fell here. So that's very strong. Yes, that's a pretty strong question. Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
That's an interesting way of thinking about it. If that's what you're saying, that our attachment to self is really our own recognition of our own true nature.
Well, yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, that's, you know, why is it that so many of us as therapists have such trouble connecting to ourselves for when it comes to self care, right? It's because many of us didn't have that. Like, so that ideally, to me, the reparative experience is giving the opportunity and enough safety that they begin to trust what they see in your eyes. And but for that, I have to see them. So that's my true north in therapy, is to make that space within which the child will come that will have all the qualities of that the mother or the caregiver would be providing or reflecting, and giving the appropriate holding and limit that then allows to make one's own boundaries, right? So that then within that space, the child is able to catch glimpses of themselves so that when they look in the mirror, they see that. And that's done through the art, through the play, through the sand play, in the imageries they create. Do you see?
Well, it's so, this, I mean, this is why I wanted to have this conversation with you, because that this is the heart, right? This is the heart that you brought so long ago into our field, and you continue to bring into our field. And it's such a core piece that I think sometimes now when I hear play therapy, in play therapy trainings, it's really focused on the what to do versus the how to be. And you're just talking about a whole different piece of no, how do we, what's the being part of this that allows for the connection, that allows for the reflection, that allows, and so it's, so thank you. With that, one of my questions that's emerging as you're talking through this, back to um, the idea of the caregiver, right? The child being able to catch a glimpse of themselves through the eyes of their caregiver.
It's a mirror.
The mirror, exactly. Would you say that in order for a caregiver to even see a child's true nature, go one step this way, they have to have also been able to see their own true nature? Is it possible to see a child's true nature without seeing your own true nature? Is a question I have for you.
Well, that's always the challenge, you see. It's a big, big question because most of us as therapists were quite capable of creating the space for people to connect to their true nature. And we have a way, and while we're in it, in that playroom, we are connected because when it's for someone else, we'll do it. But when you close that door and you go on your own, there isn't, it's way more challenging. So that's an interesting question because what we're talking about is how much self-knowledge and self-development and basic connection to ourselves to even know it exists. Because in a lot of approaches to therapy, it doesn't even exist. It's become more popular lately. I've noticed that. But I'm telling you, back in the 80s, when I said those things, you know, a good thing I had a foreign name. And, and I was, you know, they thought I was a little strange at first, but because they would say, oh, the woman from Canada, she's got a weird name, but she's really good with kids. So that was, but yeah, it took quite a bit for people to begin to hear it. But I forget where I went. My mind just went sideways. Yeah.
The question that we're teasing through is how much does well, I asked in the parents, but we'll do parents or therapist or caregiver and the therapist. How much does the adult need to have had access or contact with their own true self, or their own essence, in order to really see it in another human being, or in particular with children?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you're talking about cherishing oneself and about love now. So, how much has somebody had to receive unconditional love and be seen and felt safe being themselves and feel seen in order to give that? And that's always been, to me, a mystery and a miracle because I have seen some people able to do that with very little, as long as they have it somewhere. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question. How much, I think it's always so unique, right? And I think it's how much, it's not just how much, it's the quality of what went through and when and how. You know how sometimes, and that's what's happened to me, for instance, when I met this priest came to my village and saw me. I wouldn't be here if he hadn't for that short period of time. So, no, you know, it's the quality of it more than the quantity, I feel, which is why I have continued to do this work, because we hardly see the children at all. I see most children I see are, Indigenous children in foster care, and I see them twice a month. And how am I going to make a difference? So I have to believe in the quality, right? And I see so that they know it exists. And they'll recognize it when it happens again. But as therapist and as a parent, that's why your question takes me back on how I work with the parent as well. I give the parent what I give the child when I see them, so that it helps them feel safe to open their heart to themselves with compassion. I think you're talking about us developing like that cherishing and self-compassion, in order to have our heart open enough that we can see the other. And there has to be a certain degree of being there for yourself enough to have enough to be there for others. Like when we're completely overwhelmed and drowning, we can't focus, we can't be there. So we need to have that. And my playroom, I created in such a way that it gives that to others, but also to me. So when I walk in the door, my whole being knows where to go physically, like I'm there. Not that I'm not off sometimes, but I can have time with Rosalie and Giselle, and then I come back. But is that to be able to be present with as a parent or as a therapist is essential. And that's been my big worry when I see parents and children walking on the beach now, and the parents are on the phone and the children are pulling and trying to get their attention, and they're not getting it. Like it's like the amount and the quality of the attention that says, I see you, you're important, you're valuable. Like feeling valuable and seeing that you have a right to be here. And you see that in somebody's eyes. And it's so exquisite. It's like if you love, I often say, if you love chocolate the first time you were given chocolate, you've never forgotten it, right? You know the taste, you know what it feels like. And when the children come in, let's say, say I'm having a challenge, or the session before I wasn't quite able to separate from, and they can feel there's a cloud over the sun that's shining, right? And they will keep, they'll do all kinds of things to let you know. Yeah, I'm kind of going back and forth here, so yeah.
I mean, all of it just points back to the metaphor that you had shared about the white dot. And I mean, what I'm hearing is the caregiver has a white dot, the parent, right? The therapist has a white dot, the child has a white dot, and the white dot is impacted as we go through life. But what I'm hearing is that part of the healing, or if not the whole purpose of the healing journey, is what does it take to get back to the white dot, or what does it take to
Yeah, yeah,
space to allow
yeah,
that white dot to
yeah.
move in the way that it's trying to heal.
I'm pretty impressed with that white dot. It's really powerful.
Yeah, let's
And
talk
I always
about.
say, if you look at a blade of grass that will break through asphalt, that life force is in that white dot. So give it, if you can find a crack to pour a little bit of water or something, to allow it, is very strong. It's very strong. And I think a lot of the different things that children will do and that we do is like an attempt to keep it going, right?
I have a quote that I pulled just in case it came up for the perfect time, and this is the perfect time for me to read, and it's one of your quotes. So
Oh,
I want to share one of your quotes because it says, "I have witnessed that despite all obstacles, the drive to form strong bonds of affection, to love and be loved, and for growth and healing is as tenacious as the child who keeps on falling and getting up until she can walk. It is as powerful as the drive of the plant that grows through concrete to reach the sunlight, and as compelling as the instinct of migrating birds to come home. It is my role as a therapist to facilitate the awakening and reconnection to this drive so that my clients will discover the power of their resiliency."
yeah. Thank you. That's it. That's it, as far as I'm concerned. Thank you. Yeah.
And I love it because it really does come back to this white dot. And I love that we're talking. I just love that we're talking about this.
Yeah.
What what do you think is in the way for therapists? Let's start with therapy. What's in the way of therapists? Either
Well,
seeing the
it's
dot
for,
kids or
oh,
their own white dot, their own
yeah.
true essence.
Yeah, and then I have to talk about the quality of the attachment to start with,
Yeah, okay, let's go there.
because you see, uh, ideally, the parent connected to self, the therapist, is creating like that egg shape that I draw, right? Around and making that safe place around that seed to grow, with the kind, giving it the kind of light, the kind of water, checking the earth, keeping it safe, allowing it to have enough experiences, but not so that it would just wipe them out because they're too young, kind of thing, right? And so a lot of the time, what has happened, so out of that, if you, in a drawing, I show the kind of, in a way, the attachment that then forms where the child attaches to the mother or the caregiver, but there is a back and forth in the pattern of attachment where the child expresses a need and that need is answered. Okay, now for many of us, to a degree, it was not like that. It was, and multi-generationally, it wasn't like that. It was reading the child has a need, expresses a need, basic needs, could get punished for it. Okay, it's the unsafe to have the needs. And always then the child, instead of learning to make their own boundaries in connection with their self, they turn inside out. It's always checking to see if it's safe, what's going to happen, if you're going to get punished, if, and so there is a disconnection from one's needs, oneself, and with that, our gifts and everything that is in there. So if you're a forget-me-not and you're constantly being reflected to you that you're a nettle or something, that you should be pulled out because you've got the wrong skin, for instance, the wrong color, or even where you live, or, there's so many layers of that where what's being reflected to you is a projection of other people's darkness, really, of what they see, right? We do that to each other all the time. And so at a young, in a consistent way, depending on your surroundings, let's say where you brought up, that is constantly being mirrored to you. That's what you see. That's what you feel. It's in your cells. You're bad. You're weed. You don't, all those things, right? So there is the opposite that's being internalized. some at a very young age. If that happens in the womb at the end, you're being baked in it. Okay. And then earlier on, it continues. Can you see then the boundaries that you're going to form, which is like those drawings with the attachment twisted and, the spikes going out, right? So that you cannot connect to yourself. It doesn't exist. You're constantly drowning, trying to see the outside world. What's there? How are you going to survive? Doesn't that sound familiar? How disconnected we all are now? Right? Always, it's always dangerous. It's always, and the anxiety and all that. So there's never, a seed needs to be able to settle in the ground. If it's shaken all the time, you can't put down your roots and start growing. You're just like this all the time. And you're getting children who are like this, but, right? All the things we give medications for. So that's one. Without that protection, then there is different varying of traumas from, we call it sexual abuse, emotional abuse, all the different kinds of abuses that go on at home. And when home is where the trauma is, that's the kind of boundary, that's a kind of profound disconnection you have. Now, at about where 2.5, 3, the child says, I am. And that's when, ideally, in a way, they would be the first little shoot coming out of the ground, right? And having a sense of self and needing more space and more developing their own way boundaries, but still held. Now, if there's a lot of other traumas on top of the attachment trauma, there is a disconnection between the bulb and the plant, that the flower that's coming out. A tulip needs to be connected to its bulb to continue growing and flowering and, and all of that, right? So the trauma then disconnect. So both the not being connected to oneself plus the trauma. So it comes from those two directions that I try to address throughout in the therapy, always knowing that sometimes I can have a 9-year-old who had prenatal trauma, multi-generational, most of the children I see. So then my environment and what I provide is there to be able to address all these different layers through different expressive therapies, through the multisensory and all of that, so that they can begin to express and transform this pain. So it's not taking it away, it's transforming it that I believe in. And that's a really slow process, and we get stuck. And that's why we look for techniques, because we become impatient. And I've been in therapy working on myself for the last 50 years. I've been a therapist because of, my background in wanting to, in a way, transform that. So I myself am, in a way, my life and my work is a transformation of what I'm talking about. That's a physical expression of it, of who I am. In that process, in my playroom, I created in a way, a physical expression of these drawings that I do. And I have to believe in that innate wisdom firsthand. I'm just a little French peasant. I used to wear wooden shoes. I hadn't seen, do you know what I mean? Like if I have it, everyone else has it. It's just a level of disconnection. And some people none of my siblings and nieces and nephews in many ways had the chance to have that, what life brought me. So, that's where my work comes from. It's like, I know, that it's really important, possible to give back. It's a gift I was given as well in many ways. And it's quite wonderful to come to a place when you can, like, I know firsthand it's possible. I don't know that I can help everyone do that because I think I always had a particularly strong drive to grow somehow. And but I want, when somebody comes in my playroom, I know no matter how they behave that it's there. My true north is, how am I going to make it safe enough? How am I going to be grounded enough, connected to myself enough to hold this that's walking in my room with all the, because it's a lot of energy that we're holding all the time. How am I going to be enough that I can hold this and give them a time and a place in their own time, in their own way, said Virginia Axline, right? She was onto something, definitely. In their own time and in their own way, how are they going to be able to reconnect to their self with a big S, that I can help them do that? So from that place, that connected place, they can begin to express and transform so that they can have an embodied experience of their self. And that's, and I see it. I see the way they walk in pale, and they've been on the internet in the car. They've been, they, and then they, they jump out of the gate and back in the car. But unfortunately, the internet is back in the car again, right? There's a phone there waiting for them till they're being driven home. And so it's been, the big thing is, how do we not get discouraged?
Marie José, this is coming to mind as you're describing this. So when I spend time in Vancouver, I love to go to Stanley Park. And for our listeners that are not familiar with Stanley Park, it's a beautiful walking area, taking a walk through the forest. And one of the things that I love looking for amongst the trees are the trees that seem to have been going straight up, and then something happened.
Yes.
Maybe another tree fell into it. Maybe you could tell it was hit by something, lightning or storm or something, or a branch fell, and it had to do a detour, right? It almost like it could have stopped, right? It could have stopped growing, but instead it somehow made this
Yeah.
incredible detour,
Yep.
a brand new path back up.
That's right.
And as you're describing it, I just had that image in my mind of a child coming in at that juncture place of, am I gonna I want to grow, but I don't know how. And then with that right support, as you're talking about finding within their own development
Yeah.
the healing. And part of what I love what you said is we transform it, because that detour in the tree is part of the beauty of the tree. It's part of what I love to look at.
Yeah.
And so the wound becomes part of the beauty,
Yeah.
rather than something that was just this thing, right, that happened. So I don't know why that image came in so strongly as you were talking, maybe because we keep talking about seeds and growth, but
Another metaphor I used to show it sometimes with trauma is turning when the broken glass becomes sea glass, right? Yeah. And how what is being covered, but is, you get the jewel back, your jewel that's inside that, and it's a whole other kind of experience and strength. Anybody who has suffered a lot and is able to come through each time has a different quality, and you're not the same, absolutely not the same, but you've developed certain things that allow you to keep going. Unfortunately, I think we don't have enough opportunities for reconnection to the self. whether at whatever age, and that is being interfered with at a very young age in different forms where it certainly wasn't in my, in my time, like, so that's the part that concerns me. And unfortunately, and I'm going to say something that might not please some therapists, because, but unfortunately, I see that happening in the field of therapy. I feel that everything, because of it's such a special time and a sacred time for them to give someone the opportunity to reconnect with themselves. Doesn't mean you tiptoe and you have to have all those things, but at least whatever bit you offer, you need to have to give them the quality that reminds them of their true nature, that what it means to be a human being with the qualities, that a human being is needs to develop. And it's going to be very important with AI and all the stuff that's happening. And you're not going to see inside out stuff in my playroom. Okay. To me, and I haven't said that aloud, but those little figurines are so ugly, so plastic. They have nothing to do with the richness and the beauty of the whole range of feelings, right? And the whole range of feelings is so wide and so alive and so large and so flowing, how it's expressed. It's not that little expression on the face with a little sticker. I find it so hard. And I'm doing my best to not be judgmental, but I feel like when I see something I feel is really going away from where I've personally dedicated my life to go towards, I guess. I have to, be careful with what I say there, but it concerns me with the lack of quality that what I see children being given.
So I want to come full circle, because you did a beautiful job at going back to the attachment piece and really helping us understand that really the thing that's in the way are our traumas. Really, it's our traumas and so the question is, what's in the way for therapists, right, to either connect with their true self or to
Same.
trauma piece. And so I feel like this would really be an important time to talk about. Or I don't even know if it's a conversation, because it just seems so obvious, but the significance and the importance of therapists being in an ongoing process of their own discovery of themselves.
To me, that's the ethics.
Right. And so it's like, and so if we are not, as therapists,
Mm-hmm.
if we're not aware, we're not tracking our own process, we're not in an active process.
Mm-hmm.
Will you just say a little bit? What's the disservice?
Well, you basically make your clients do your work. If you think when you're in there, if their unconscious, you might call it, affects you, yours affects them. And therefore, what you bring in makes a difference. Now, we're not being asked to walk on water and being self-realized, but I think we're asked to own the piece that's ours and be awake to it, keep an eye on it, so that when I walk in, I'm awake to what's going on inside me, what's going on with the child that I perceive, what's between us. It's a lot to keep attention to, and to get to know how I come back to myself when I really need it, when I lose it in the middle of a session, when something has triggered me, which, we influence each other all the time, because you want to your color, you want to be holding the space, not the child in charge of the space, even though you don't know what I'm saying. You're just holding the whole process. So to do that demands way more self-knowledge and constant knowing and reconnection than it would if you, let's say, I don't know. I mean, it would be great. I think our world would be a better place if we all did. But I think in this work, it's like, it's like to me, I love this work and it's my art form in a way. And it's like when your violin, like has to be well looked after, well strung as much as possible. You need to pay attention to it before you're going to play that music that they will walk into. And it has to match. It has to be so connected, because that takes a lot. You have so connected to yourself that you can also be connected to the other at the same time and make that a priority. Because yourself is at their service, not the other way around. You will there and the triggers then I pay attention to, and then I go and make a phone call or a session and take care of it. And it's really I've watched so many people getting burnt out because if you don't keep on working on your triggers, which you will invariably have, and clearing them, they will keep coming back and pile up. And at the end of the day, you will have not only your stuff, but all your clients' stuff, and you won't be able to walk.
You won't be able to see the white dot.
I'm sorry?
You won't be able to see the white dot.
Oh, no, that's for sure.
The white
What white dot are you talking about?
The white dot
course.
starts to
Yeah.
disappear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like physical and emotional we're talking about experience,
So beautiful, Marie José, truly. As we are coming to a wrap-up point, we're talking about true nature, about attachment. We're talking about the need to create a certain kind of environment, the space itself, but then also what we bring to that environment to support the emergence of the child's true self. Anything that feels left unsaid for today's conversation?
Well, with that in mind, because from, over time, I've developed, there's different components and methods that I would use in general that I keep track of, that is available, that I consciously have set up, that is there to facilitate that process. And so they're both what's is set up, and it takes a lot of self-discipline in a way, and awakeness and awareness to have that. But when the person comes, all of it goes, like you don't keep, you're not in the cognitive anymore. You're reinventing and creating as you go step by step. So you need to know, what is all the things that aware of what you're doing and where your things are and all of that. And that takes a bit extra. That's what I call, the major components, which have to do, first, like creating a safety with the system the child lives in. So with the same quality, but to engage the system, and the more you can work with it, the better. So depending. And then they come in what I call the milieu, which is with nature, and the multisensory that nature does better than anyone. And so if you can have as much nature and natural materials, you will have that. And then within that, the expressive therapies, and each has their own gifts, their challenges. I know where they are, how they set up. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end, right? Closure. And then within that is that alchemical process that takes place in whatever expressive therapy they might have chosen. That has a way of reflecting beginning, middle, and end, so that you go deeper in your reflection, and then learn how to come out and close. And then I have a ritual, a closing ritual, light a candle, make a wish, a lollipop, and then we go outside. So because that piece is really missing, you really need, if you're going to, the more you open, if you're going to take your clothes off and have a deep massage, you need to put them back on before you drive out there, right? So closure is really important. And one of the challenges is a lot of the techniques that are being used do not take closure into account. And so if you do that and use that in the school, and the children, it's like you've opened all the drawers. None of them have been closed. It's all over the place. I've experienced that over and again with trying to find a therapist for myself a lot of the time. Yeah. Is that closure is so essential. So it's a lot of, it's a big commitment to be a therapist and a play therapist. And so I'm always grateful for all the people who are doing it now, and we're in great need of it. So, but I can't see a way to healing without that connection to the self, because it's like, how do you heal without your immune system? What I'm talking about is activating the immune system, the emotional immune system, right? In the connection to it. So it's essential to not forget it. And I think it's forgotten a lot of the time. There are other approaches that, become popular lately that I think takes that into account. I'm personally always careful to not go into to have enough structure, but not so much of a detailed protocol and techniques that it takes away. It's like, you have to have it so it can flow and be spontaneous as well as following and guiding. And it's more an art than a science, I think. Although the science is helpful, it's very reassuring. Yeah.
Thank you for naming the closure piece, so that,
It's essential.
yeah. So with closure, Marie José,
Yeah.
once again, thank you. Thank you for what you brought to our field many, 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 many years ago. Thank you for your continued work. Thank you for your dedication. Thank you for the journey that you have been on, connecting to your true self so that you can bring
Yeah.
and the easiest of journeys.
Well, and I want to thank you for not only what you've brought, but in our relationship, in um, your your willingness and your generosity in helping what's so essential to me, what I've wanted to pass on and give alive. So it doesn't get completely buried when I go. Yeah, yeah. And which won't be for a while. I've figured I look around my playroom and I say, okay, it needs to have another 10 years here. And then what am I going to do with all these beautiful things? And the children ask me all the time, what are you going to do with this when you die? They say. So, yeah, anyway. So I thank you. And, I'm grateful to the people who will listen, and I hope it gives them something to think about, and it reminds them that of their little white dot.
I feel like that needs to be the mantra You know, do you
Yeah.
know, yeah, how's the white dot doing? Do you even
Yeah, yeah. It's so big and complex that, oh my goodness, yes, it's one of those things, huh? Yeah.
So, listeners, if you want to learn more about Marie José, we'll have her information in the show notes for you. And she does do trainings if you want to spend some time with her in her beautiful, beautiful playroom and learn directly from her. And listeners, wherever you are in the world, I think the white dot is the theme for our conversation.
Yes.
Tend to it, whatever it takes.
Yeah.
Tend to it. It's essential, and it fits right along with what you all know I say at the end of every episode, which is you're the most important toy, tool, being, however you want to say that in the playroom, and what's happening in you is essential for the child's journey. So tend to yourself. And thank you again, Marie José.
I hope they enjoyed their cup of tea.
Exactly. And thank you for joining us in this conversation. Until
Thank
next time, everyone.
thank you, Lisa. Au revoir.